The stuff I'm going to read is probably going to take up most of 15 minutes, so I don't get to talk that much about William Saroyan. But he's a writer that I've loved for a long time. I feel like a kinship with him because we both spent our youth in the Central Valley, me in Bakersfield, him in Fresno. They're kind of similar cities. And then he spent a lot of time in San Francisco when he was a young man starting off writing. And a couple of the stories that I'm going to read he wrote while living in San Francisco, I believe. The stuff I'm going to read from him are kind of obscure. They're from his second book of stories called Inhale and Exhale. It's been out of print for a long time, but I was lucky enough to find an affordable copy online. And I'm drawn to his stuff. His early stories, they're kind of like, almost like prose poems. Like the first one I'm going to read is just like 2 pages of, it's like one run-on sentence for 2 pages, you know, so it's just like this kind of flowing, almost like a poem. And so I'm just going to read. And this is called The Drunkard. Okay. 722 people, or maybe 10 times that many, or maybe all the people in the world were standing over and around him where he had fallen drunk in the gutter. And all he could see was 49,000 eyes or more, and half that many faces or more, ladies and gentlemen and children, and what eyes. And all he could feel was the gigantic size of himself in the world. The biggest of them all, the strongest, the liveliest, the wisest, the kindest, the most handsome. Bigger than Mussolini, stronger than Lionel Strongfort, wiser than all the college professors of the country put together, kinder than the community chest, funnier than the 4 Marx Brothers. And he had the need to talk, to tell them what he knew, to make them know. Citizens and friends of the Free Republic, enemies of fascism and police brutality, I lie before you thus in the gutter, grandly, a patriot and a taxpayer, a veteran of the Great World War, wounded twice, once in the thigh and once in the left leg, never decorated but always a hero. And all he could do was rest his weary bones and talk this way, and grin while the greatness in him stood large and strong over the crowd, and over the city and over the world and over all life. And all he could do was open and close his eyes, and hope miserably he was dreaming. And it was so sad and so funny, because he told her yesterday he would never drink again, and now look at him, the craziest fool in the world, and all these people witnesses to his weakness, all of them standing around and waiting for him to get up and talk and walk away, and all the eyes and all the faces. My good friends, my dearly beloved brothers and sisters, we are so weak, all who live. Dear ones, we are so weak, so tired. It is so much of a hardship even to stand on one's leg, and so much of a hardship to walk. Christians and fellow sufferers, it is so much of a hardship to be alive. And he couldn't stand anymore, and nobody wanted to help him. And all they wanted to do was watch and wait for the police to come and take him away. And then a boy, a mere boy, tried to lift him and couldn't. My son, he said, God in heaven will reward you for this someday. Our Father in heaven will turn his bright light on such a pure heart. And then he sank back down with a groan, needing more than anything else just to rest. And he heard laughter. He heard them laugh. You lice of the world, he said, you rats of city streets. I am a veteran of the Great World War. I have walked among the dead and dying. I have known hunger and thirst and fear and madness. I have fallen bleeding on bloody earth. I have stumbled through the world's black nightmare of hate and pain. And I have lived and laugh. Now laugh, you lice and rats. I shall be alive and all of you are dead and buried and forgotten. I shall haunt this earth when our very sun is lost in the emptiness of an empty universe. Who the hell are you anyway? I'm drunk. I know I'm drunk. You don't have to tell me I'm drunk. I know how drunk I am. But I'm drunk with knowing, and you rats are drunk with ignorance, see? You must be born again, you rats, and you can't be born again until you die. You are afraid to die. You are afraid to live. You are afraid to breathe. You are afraid to look and talk and speak and move. You are afraid to fall in the street and know you are only flesh and blood. Who are you, anyway? That's that one. another short one. It's called Train Going. This one is slightly edited due to time, but I kept the meat of it. Train going. What hearts break at railway stations, and how the tears fall. How the eye blurs with agony and the torn flesh aches. How the nerves tremble, the tongue goes numb, the throat dries, and the million moments of yesterday roll away to death. The bell of the train ringing, the steel wheels beginning slowly to move, beginning slowly to carry away the tragic hours of a man's life with a woman. Stay, do not go. Let us go back and mend the broken pieces. Let us return to the errors and make them right, so that we can breathe again. Let us go to each place of error and begin from the beginning. And before the train is too far away for him any longer to see her face, his heart rushes back to each place they knew together. The dull, quiet rooms of morning and night, the chairs and the tables, the windows, the restaurants, the theaters, the streets, the parks, the trees and lakes, the sky, conversations on the telephone. Before the train has gone too far, he has returned to the places of many moments, stalked through them like a maniac, a ghost seeking in the world her ghost, the lost in himself seeking the lost in her, and not finding. Before the wheels of the train have turned 5 times, he has run through the world and destroyed all things of error. He has left the dull, quiet rooms roaring in flames. The world must end and begin again. But all he does is stand in one place and smoke a cigarette, knowing it can never be, knowing the errors shall stand, knowing the train will disappear in a moment, and he will return alone to the places they knew, and live, though it might be best to die. And he turns away and disappears into the world. In one place it is a young Englishman, in another it is an Austrian, or an Italian, or a Spaniard, or a Russian. In every language he knows, wordlessly, that shall always be so. Error and glory shall be together, inhale and exhale. And everywhere the train keeps moving, it is by schedule. And at first it moves slowly, making all who weep feel there is still time to change everything, the whole order of the world. And the mothers of life stand in the railway stations of the world and weep. And they know, just as the lover knows, that it shall always be so. They will never understand what force it is that made it so. They will never know why it is so, but they will know it will never change. They will go back to their houses and to the dull, aching moments of life again bleeding. And the same bell ringing, the same train beginning to go. And there he is in the station, the same as ever, eternally there, the small newsboy with no friend, child of the world, a street boy, standing in vast loneliness, with eyes widened with love for the traveler. His lifted hands to nobody, to everybody, goodbye, and the fierce smile of relationship. Jesus Christ, we are alive together in the same world, and now you are going away, goodbye. And he runs, and he stays a little longer, nearer to you whom I do not know. And he keeps running, and the train begins to move faster, and he begins to move faster, waving at everybody, goodbye. We shall meet again. This is not the end. Goodbye. This is my piece. I kind of try to write with kind of the flow and the feel of a Soroyan piece, and kind of try to touch upon a few of the themes in the other 2 pieces. So we'll see. And I'm not sure what it's called. Maybe it's called The Music of the World. There was a time when she imagined him beautiful, and the memory of it filled him simultaneously with both joy and sorrow. He was riding on the airport train into the city, and the memory of their time together tasted of every beautiful thing and of all things broken and lost and irredeemable. See, this was the train that brought her to him, and this was the train that took her away. And he held tight to the memories, even the pain of them, because already it all seemed so far away and unreal. The fact of her boarding a plane and flying across all the miles to be with him, here in this sad and glorious city, because she somehow imagined him beautiful, somehow imagined him brave, seemed ludicrous to him now. But he held each memory like a precious stone. her waiting there at the baggage claim in the airport lobby with her suitcase and flowered dress. It was a clear October morning as they rode the train into the city, and they looked at all the little colored houses that lined the hills, and she clung to his arm and said, "It's pretty," and it was. And the train dropped them into the middle of downtown, and they walked through it all like Christmas. They walked the blocks to the hotel. When they arrived, it was barely noon, and the man would not check them in until 3. So they left their bags and trudged up Van Ness Avenue and found a movie theater. And they rode the escalators up, and they sat in the darkness, glad that hardly anybody went to movies on a Tuesday at noon. And he remembered them there together in the darkness and the flickering light of the screen, the smell of her and his hands upon her body, like the perfect teenage date he never had. And they were afraid of being caught, of being cast back out into the sunlight against their will. But their desire trumped their fear, and no one bothered them. And eventually the lights came up, and they drifted back arm in arm back out into the city, alive in the midst of it, alive as things are supposed to be alive, alive in a way he didn't know he could be. And the businessmen stared, and the shop owners stared, and the junkies stared, and the shopping cart people stared, and the buses stuffed with all the sad, angry faces just stared, because they walked through the city unashamed to be alive and in love. And right then, all the sorrow of everything couldn't touch them. It just parted like a wave, and they walked on through. But that was months ago, and today the sorrow of the city had returned with a vengeance and made a nest inside his heart. He was walking down Market Street, and he saw it on every face and everyone's way of speaking and being. And he walked through the crowds and the people, and they all seemed dead, like they had forgotten how or had never bothered to live. And he had always imagined himself different somehow, alive in the midst of all this death, but he understood now that until her arrival he had been as dead as the rest of them. And now with her absence he was that way again. He understood now that maybe that was the trick, to be dead like everything else. Maybe that was the only way to make it through the days intact. It was painful to be alive, an act of defiance and bravery. To be alive is to open yourself to the pain and terror of existence, to the danger of it overwhelming you, washing you away, and having you become part of it forever. In the end, he hadn't been brave or alive enough for her in the way that she needed him to be. He remembered their parting, himself neither alive nor brave enough to go with her or ask her to stay, and her eyes forever condemning him for his weakness. Now he was walking past the sad motel, the only home they ever knew, if it was only for a handful of days. And they'd been alive within those walls, and the word love fell from their lips without shame. And they fucked and laughed and listened to the junkies coughing and fighting through the thin, dirty walls. And they listened to the choking curses and the mournful wails of all the lost and the broken, wandering up and down Market Street endlessly. And they felt so alive together when so much of the world was dead. And just beneath the joy of it was a desperation, as if they knew that they would soon be cast out of their perfect moments, cast out back among the oceans of the dead. And he remembered wanting to capture the feel of it within himself like a thing in amber, so that he might remember and keep it with him to give him light at some point in the future, when the magic of living had abandoned him, and he was lost and afraid in the darkness of an average day. And he clung to these memories as he wandered past the sad motel, hoping those dirty walls remembered their laughter. And down the block he glanced inside the little sushi place they had lunched at every day, but the lady at the counter didn't recognize him now that he was alone. And he walked on to the karaoke bar where they had drank every night, and he sat down and ordered a martini just as he did when she was there, as if that might somehow bring her back just a little bit. And after his drink, he got up on the little stage in front of the happy hour crowd, and he sang the saddest song he knew, a kind of protest to her absence, singing to her ghost and her memory, and all the moments lost to him, as if through music he might will them back to life. But nobody showed much interest in his offering of communal sorrow. So he sat back down with another drink, and the bartender recognized him and smiled and said, "Where's your friend?" And he said, "She's gone." "Gone?" the bartender asked. "Yes, gone," he answered, "back to Ohio, back to whatever it is people do in such places. Gone for good." And the bartender asked, "Gone for good?" And he said, "Yes, gone for good." And she said, "That's a shame. She was pretty and nice." And he said, "Yes, she was pretty and nice." And the bartender smiled a sad little smile and turned away. He finished his drink and went back out into the night, and he hit every bar he could find. But they were all indifferent to his sadness. So he just wandered the night, and the loneliness of it was embarrassing. And he could feel her watching somehow, feeling the loneliness of everything within him and saying, "I told you so. I told you I could have saved you from this if you had been brave enough to let me." And he felt a sudden guilt for ever having allowed her to think he was beautiful and alive. That it was selfish of him to have misled her so, and she was right to be bitter. And he was sad to think of how the feel and the sound of her was now forever meant for someone else, someone beautiful in the way she needed them to be. But if such a person existed, he guessed that it was okay after all. Maybe it was enough for him to have been beautiful in her eyes for just a little while, because it was more than most people got from the world. And he kept the feeling of it deep within him where the dead couldn't find it. And he finally found a quiet bar that had a gentle feel. He got a beer and drank it. And the sadness in the room had a softness to it. And drunk on booze and memories, he gazed at the soft, sad faces around him and decided finally that time was nothing. It lacked the power to truly take anything away. Every moment existed now and forever, endlessly, beyond the reach of ruin. The terror and the sorrow and the laughter of it all was bigger than death. And he accepted it all, understanding that it was the music of the world. And it was only broken because almost nobody remembered how to sing.